Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're going to be talking about creating brand resiliency. Are you ready for recovery? I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Boulay Group, CPAs and advisors, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Minnesota Sales, a sales acceleration firm, Romaine Berg, digital marketing, and the Network Connect, a catalytic gateway for growing your company. I want you all to subscribe and like our channel. Club E needs your help, so please take time, just a few moments here. I'll wait for you. Go ahead and click the subscribe button down below, down by the video. And it's going to help us deliver better content to you, our audience, and more value to our sponsors. I would like very much to introduce today's sponsor and speaker, Ann Berg, principal of Vyway Market and Brand Strategy. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you here and looking forward to our talk. Ann can be found at ann@vyway.com, and down in the comments field below, you can see the spelling on the firm. And then again, in the comments field below, please put any questions you have, and we will do our best to get to those questions. So thanks again, Ann, for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, the firm, various things that you're up to.
Okay, that sounds great. So I started years ago, too long to actually account for, in the big ad agency world, and started as a Marcom writer in a PR department. But I have been an entrepreneur running Vyway Market and Brand Strategy now for 24 years. I'm eager to celebrate my 25th anniversary next year. And we do everything from brand naming to go-to-market campaigns and just about anything you can imagine that has to do with branding or marketing. Ultimately, my goal is to accelerate client brand performance and even business profitability. And I have a couple of proprietary methodologies I like to use. One I call Vision Vantage Voice and one called Passion Performance Profit. They're kind of strategy models, mostly based on Jim Collins' work, who wrote Built to Last and Good to Great. In these days at home, I'm working on helping clients rethink their strategy thanks to COVID, and I'm organizing everything in my condo. And I'm also trying to practice being calm and breathing, taking long walks and meditating just to make sure that I'm not too stressed out. In addition to coloring my own hair at home too. So
if somebody needs a little help on the hairstyling, they can call you up.
absolutely. Although I think your hair looks great, so don't touch it.
All right, well, thank you. And I understand in talking to you a little bit before today's event, you like kind of interior design and decorating. Tell us a little bit about that. And then the other thing that I found fascinating is that you were racing sailboats, and quite big sailboats.
Yes, that's true. I've been a sailor on the Great Lakes since I was in college, and kind of accidentally ended up on a boat in Bayfield, Wisconsin on Lake Superior for my first yacht race, having never done it before in my life. And the only reason I got invited was because I was female. It was a all ladies day race and they needed more women. And I said, well, I can be female. I don't know if I can do anything else, but I can certainly do that. And so they said, well, come on up. So I did, and it was an instant addiction for me. I just loved it. It was fascinating and loved being out on the water. And my parents are from Upper Michigan. And so it was a wonderful reunion with the Great Lake Superior. I really enjoyed it.
And again, I'm not being a sailor, but when you talked about the size of the boats that you were doing racing on, to me, it was pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, the boat I race on is called Chewbacca, and it's a 50-foot Nelson Merrick, and it has an 80-foot mast. It's a former ocean racing vessel, and the owners that currently have it in Bayfield, Wisconsin, bought it from an ocean racing fleet. But it's been a phenomenal ride for a lot of years. The boat I raced on prior to that up there was only 35 feet, but the 50-footer is just fantastic. The only downside is it takes probably about 15 crew people to run it. So it's a big crew to get together for every single race.
All right, well, I'm not going to be able to help you much with that. So as much as I'd like to do it, I can't say I think I want to be on your list of invitees. So anyway,
I've got plenty of people up there. So if you ever want to go, let me know.
All right. So before we get to our event, I want to talk about what you, the audience, can get for your participation. Our hashtag today is hashtag brand strategy. And put that in the comment field, submit a question if you'd like. We're going to pick two winners. They're going to get a 1 hour session with Fran after the event. Again, it's hashtag brand strategy, and two winners will be chosen. So, Anne, given what's going on, tell us a little bit about why it's important to continue to invest in marketing and branding right now.
What a great question. So the way I think about it is I almost think of it like yeast. If you're familiar with how yeast is activated, you add sugar and some warm water and the dough rises. And I think of the sugar as kind of your marketing investment. It's really important to keep your marketing investment and marketing dollars working these days because it's literally your sales engine and it's also your revenue engine. And so the question I would ask the audience is why would you choose to decrease revenues now when you probably need them more than ever? And it's fascinating to me to see which companies seem to be just cutting marketing. And I think it's a really bad move. And it sounds self serving, but I honestly mean it on behalf of the clients. Because the easiest way to come out of a downturn is with the help of good marketing and good branding. You truly accelerate faster during the recovery if you're doing your marketing and branding and maintaining it as you go along. And the other advantages include inspiring your team, positioning you as a leader in the marketplace, and then not the least of which is you stand out as your competition kind of goes silent because there's a lot more white space out there for your voice to be heard.
So if folks are trying to get their voices heard, and there's a lot of turmoil, and people's minds might not be where you want them to be from a business perspective, what would be the main concerns for those in marketing and branding today?
I would say, and I would love it if audiences, if your audience would reply to this too and tell me the concerns they have. But kind of from a practical perspective, I would say the number one thing is slow down. People are so stressed out that they think being busy and just doing something is better than doing nothing. But I would caution that advice and I would say, so slow down, pause, and listen to your audience, listen to the marketplace, and pay attention. And then upon reflection, be open to new thinking, new ideas, new opportunities, new solutions that are out there. It's really a question of just being aware. And I would also encourage people to accelerate their digital transformation. We're going into an always on virtual world more than we ever have. And so I think it's important to make certain that we have our digital capabilities up to snuff. Kind of from more of a philosophical perspective, kind of deeper thinking and feeling about it, I would encourage people to get comfortable with discomfort and with uncertainty. There's no way we can know what's going to happen. This has never happened to us before. So there's no one that's going to be able to predict the future here. And in fact, some historians say they can't even predict the past. But there's no way to be able to know what's around the corner, especially without people like Steve Jobs in charge of big companies. So the only way to survive, thanks to the law of natural selection, is to be adaptive. And I think the companies that are paying attention and that are okay with uncertainty and that are going to be willing to change are going to be the survivors. And the last thing I would say about this is always lead with humanity at every turn, at every opportunity. I've learned over and over again how much you can accomplish with showing a little gratitude or compassion or kindness.
Sure. So we've actually talked a couple times here about how important it is to continue to market, especially with digital marketing costs being down. So in essence, it's a buy one, get one time period. But practically speaking, what's the best brand messaging strategy during these times?
Oh, interesting question. So I think of marketers as having kind of a dual role, and they almost seem like they might be in conflict, but if you do them well, they're not. And one would be being a customer advocate, and the other is being a brand steward. And of course, one is looking after your customer in the marketplace and the audience, and the other is protecting your corporate brand. I would say one of the best examples I've seen lately of this is Uber. I'm not sure how many of our watchers and viewers here have seen their television ad campaign, but the TV spot actually closed with an inspiration to not ride Uber right now because it's simply not safe. Now, that was a couple months ago, so they may have taken it down or updated it, but I think that's a wonderful example of being both customer centric and customer advocacy as well as brand stewardship. It's the perfect marriage to having a strong brand to survive in this economy. I would also encourage clients to reduce complexity and choose simplicity every time they can. And think of it as just simply telling a good story, telling a good, authentic story. Even being a little vulnerable, I think, helps. And last but not least, give back to your community and please view it as a privilege, not an obligation. Everybody needs a little help, and anybody that can do anything should be doing it.
Sure. Everybody does need a little help, and things are changing so fast. It's almost hard to keep up, which, as it ties into marketing, how does one evaluate the course that they're on, and what do they need to do to adjust given that everything is changing so much?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, since you brought up sailing earlier, I'd love to use a little sailing analogy here. When you're in the middle of a yacht race and the wind shifts, you have a couple of ideas. You can either adjust your sails, which is kind of a minimalist approach, or you can actually tack the boat and change courses. And that's a little more aggressive, but I think given these times, it's probably something everyone should be considering. Ultimately, everything we do starts and ends with people. And so, the number one thing, if you remember nothing else from this conversation today, I would say get in touch with your audience, talk to your customers. And in fact, more than talk to them, I would say listen to them. I would say conduct those VOC interviews, those voice of the customer interviews you've been meaning to do but haven't gotten around to, and practice social listening. Just get online and see what customers are saying. And finally, pay attention. Just find out what everybody's talking about. And that could mean tracking your employee ideas. It can mean watching customer behavior. You can also talk about observing the competition. What's your competition doing? And then following along or taking the lead, even better. And when I think about it, Rick, Club E is a perfect example of how a business model can and should shift during times like this to thrive.
Yep. Well, we've tried to adapt here, and been a lot of fun actually to be working with folks such as yourselves and share your knowledge with our audience. So again, thank you, Ann, for joining us.
My pleasure.
So whether it's folks listening to the marketplace or looking at their competition, or using your sailboat analogy, folks on the crew talking to the captain, how can marketers serve their C-suite amidst the turmoil and chaos that is going on, like at a time like this?
Oh, excellent. I would highly encourage marketers to think of themselves as kind of a repository for information for the C-suite. These folks are up there making decisions about how to move forward into a future that's completely unknown. And the way you can help them is by understanding what the marketplace is doing. So again, what are your customers thinking? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? What do they need from you right now? And what's interesting in moments of disruption is that new strategic positions often open up if you're paying attention, if you're aware of them. So, for example, I just recently, I think yesterday, read about Pepsi and how they opened up a couple of online retail URLs, and they're calling them Pepsi pantries. And they're now selling direct to consumer with an online retail model. So you can get some, not all, of your favorite Pepsi products, including some beverages and a lot of snacks that you can just order online, direct shipped to your house. So Pepsi was never in the online direct to consumer marketplace before, but now they are. So that was a big shift for them. I think the key here is to be customer centric all the time. Customers should be at the center of all your decision making. And it's again that issue of balancing the customer interests with the brand vision. And when you're doing that, just keep your eyes open for opportunities to shift. And that shift could be the offering, the product or service, or it could be the distribution channel. Could be just about anything, could be the business model. So just keep your eyes open and be able to report up to the C-suite. Here's what we're seeing, here's what we think, here are our recommendations.
Interesting thing about the Pepsi. I saw it happen, but I didn't kind of put two and two together till you just mentioned it. That creates some channel conflict, and I also would guess some challenges for them. So not that I want to spend a lot of time on this, but maybe just a quick comment on what you think of that Pepsi decision.
Yeah, I actually think it's brilliant, and here's why. They stepped up and did what the marketplace needed. And when I say marketplace, I mean their customer. Their customers need home delivery of their favorite products. And if it's keeping them out of the grocery stores and keeping them from getting sick, and who knows if they'll stick with this. Now, they might, and then I think they will have to deal with some of those conflicts. But for the time being, I absolutely think they're doing the right thing for the right reason. They're taking care of their customer, which is what we should all be doing if we intend to stay in business anyway.
Sure. So Pepsi was listening to the marketplace. What are some other marketplace dynamics that are driving decision makers and brand managers?
Okay, that's a good question too. So to me, this just feels like the ultimate paradox, right? We're forced into mass isolation, and yet we've never been so digitally connected. It's an incredible irony. So I think the key here is to look for new ways to connect. And another great example that I've come across recently is Walmart. They're doing drive-through product sampling. So just imagine that these Walmart stores, thousands of them across the nation, in their parking lots, they're giving out free product samples. So what's that doing? It's keeping people in their cars so they're safe. They're not entering the store, and yet they're being exposed to a Walmart experience and getting free product because it's product sampling. It's not truly product buying. And it's giving the audience a whole new experience and a way to interact and a touch point with the brand. Again, like Pepsi, it's really a perfect example of really coming up with a creative solution to come up with a new way to reach out to your audience and a new way to give your audience a new experience. So I think every business now is going to be a technology or virtual business. They just have to. And part of that responsibility is requiring a deep customer understanding. And Walmart, I think, really exemplified a deep customer understanding here. And it gets back to this idea of balance. There's always intricate balance and forces around us. The idea of urgency versus importance, or the idea of optimism versus realism, or head versus heart. There's a whole lot of sort of dichotomy out there that we have to be aware of relative to the dynamics in the marketplace right now. But in the end, do what's best for the customer.
Do what's best for the customer. That's a takeaway for sure for today. A
Yeah.
reminder for everybody, hashtag brand strategy. You can ask Ann a question. Similarly, you're going to be put into a drawing, and a couple of folks will get 1 hour session with Ann. So again, it's hashtag brand strategy. Look forward to your participation. Ann, how about some practical advice right now as we prepare for a recovery?
Okay, that's a perfect question for today. Have you ever heard the old adage? I'm sure you have, Rick, that if you have a sales problem today, you probably had a marketing problem about a year ago. And I
Yeah.
think that that's an important adage for us to consider right now. And it gets to that issue of don't stop your marketing spend right now, or you're really going to have a problem coming out of the crisis and into recovery. So remember that marketing is your revenue engine. So protect that marketing budget. Listen to your customers. That's been a theme today. But I would say even lost customers or potential prospects, potential customers, and ultimately commit to digital excellence because the world's going virtual and you don't want to be left behind. That's probably one of the most practical pieces of advice we can give today. And closing on this particular question, I'd like to share one of my all-time favorite quotes from someone who was a retired Army general. His name is General Shinseki. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard this, but it's so worth repeating. If you don't like change, you're going to dislike irrelevancy even more. Something to
I
truly consider as if you're hoping to come out of this and enter into recovery.
Well, that's very, very apropos for the current situation. So thanks for sharing that one. Very well
Mm.
done. Given the search situation, we don't want to be irrelevant. How do we shift from worrying about just plain survival to planning for a recovery?
Okay, I'm really excited to dive into this question because I want to set it up with a little bit of context first. Going way back to ancient philosopher times, our friend Socrates wrote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So, what's he really talking about there? I think he's posing an existential question to us, compelling us to know and understand simply why we exist. And then to sort of fast forward to the mid 90s, we have Jim Collins publishing Built to Last. And what did he find out in that book? That it's critical to understand your core purpose and your core values, and then how those juxtapose against an audacious goal or an audacious vision of your future. And then even more recently, which I think is fascinating, we've had a couple of our friends, Gino Wickman with his EOS work and Simon Sinek with his Golden Circle work, sort of re-emphasize this very idea, talking about the power of why. It goes way back to Socrates. It's attributed equally to Jim Collins, and now we've got our modern marketers helping us understand the power of the very simple question of why we exist. please know that purpose-driven companies are much more resilient during times of disruption. So if you can check in with your core purpose and core values and reorient the organization around those fundamentals, you'll have a much better chance of standing this competition, withstanding the competition and withstanding the crisis. You know, I've got a lot of friends over at the Proudy Project, and they talk about your current reality and your desired future. And the work that I do helps clients get from their current reality to their desired future. The strategies are critical at this point, and it's important to rethink all of them because probably many of the strategies that you committed to a year ago are no longer relevant. I think it's going to be important to reimagine a new, bold, different future with endless possibility. And ultimately, you can inspire your team with some sort of audacious vision of tomorrow.
Wow, very inspiring. Great. And thanks for sharing that with everybody. So we have had some audience questions. Again, reminding everybody it's hashtag brand strategy, hashtag brand strategy. Couple of questions here as it relates to the COVID-19 timeframe we find ourselves in. What are some examples of companies readjusting their marketing and branding strategies during the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, perfect. So keep in mind that high performance brands in our midst have actually earned trust in their category. And that's really what branding is all about. It's earning that trust with your target market. And that gives you a privilege. And that privilege is focusing on doing good in times of crisis and being able to deliver that societal value combined with really promoting your brand at the same time. That's the most ideal place that you can be. And so some of the examples I'm going to share talk about that combination of doing what's right for the customer and what's right for the brand and giving back to the community in the process. So the first one is Zappos, which I've ordered a number of pairs of shoes from them, and they're incredible, and they're known for their customer service and how easy it is to work with them. And everybody loves working with them and ordering from them because they are so customer oriented. Well, guess what they did? They created, which kind of blows my mind because it seems like it would be a big bite for them, but they created a new hotline that is customer service for anything. And you can use text, phone, or email, and you can ask about anything from pulse oximeters to flour and yeast for baking. The goal of these hotlines is to not talk about shoes or apparel, but to literally talk about what you're needing right now. And they're going to try and do their best to help you get it. That's incredible to me. What a leap of faith on their part. Another example is the company Hallmark. And this is a perfect example of social listening. It's that idea that we're talking about today of paying attention to your customer and being aware of their needs and their current experience. They actually had someone, I believe it was on Facebook, that posted something prior to Mother's Day about honoring mothers who are mothering children with disabilities. And that inspired them to create an incredible Mother's Day television commercial that is so moving. I had tears in my eyes when I was done watching it. And it's showing a mother in a very intimate moments throughout a young girl's life. And that young girl happens to have Down syndrome. Very powerful television commercial that was entirely inspired by social listening. So another example, the company Patagonia, and again, as a sailor, I've appreciated Patagonia for decades, and I've purchased many, many items from that organization. And I've always loved the fact that they have such a commitment to caring for humanity, caring for the planet, all the right things, right? So what's interesting about Patagonia is they were the very first retailer to close their stores before it was ever mandated by anyone to close a store. They just sensed and knew it was the right thing to do to keep people safe. And then also, I think they're going to be one of the last ones to open. And what they're doing in that process is really rethinking and reevaluating their entire business and business model from the inside out. They're using this as an opportunity to figure out how they can up-level what they're already doing to help with their absolutely amazing vision and mission, which is to help save the planet.
Yeah,
Another
great.
one. Oh, do you want to
No,
move on?
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've just got one more, and that's the New York Times. Just a really simple thing that they're doing. They just announced about a week ago that they're giving free digital access to all high school students in America. So what a great thing. I mean, it's usually a pay for play kind of deal, and yet they're absolutely opening up for teachers and students free access to all content in the New York Times. I think that's just a wonderful example of community, doing the right thing for the community and also doing the right thing for the brand in the long term.
Sure. So another COVID question, then we have another one again for our audience. It's hashtag brand strategy. Also click the subscribe button and the like button. We appreciate your support, as do our sponsors and future content. And talk a little bit about advice that you may give startups and early stage companies during this COVID crisis, and how might that be different than what you would tell a larger client?
Okay, that's interesting. So we'll get to the larger versus smaller after I answer this question. I would say, from a practical perspective, the number one thing is to gather that critical customer data and behavioral insights that will inform the C suite and your leadership for making decisions to move forward into an unknown future. And with that, rethinking product and service offerings in light of the customer circumstances. And as a marketer, then we also have to rethink positioning and messaging around those new customer concerns. And I think positioning is kind of a tough word. We marketers tend to use a lot of jargon, and some people don't necessarily understand what the words mean. And so I want to take a moment and just define what I think positioning really means. And also bring up the fact that years ago, when I was in the big ad agency world, the idea of positioning was all about differentiation. And that's what a lot of people still think it is about. And that's a huge piece of it, being different, being unique, offering something your competition doesn't. But what we've learned in the years since Reese and Trout wrote positioning, the famous positioning book called Differentiate or Die, we've realized that it's not just about difference, it's about relevancy, right? And so it's important that that difference matters to your audience, or you might not make a difference for them. So again, being very audience centric, the goal here is to have positioning and messaging to support that positioning that's not only unique and different, but highly relevant to your target market. From a more philosophical perspective, I would encourage people to see obstacles. And if you look around, there are so many today, but I would encourage you to think of obstacles as a way to grow and build confidence, especially for your leadership team, but also for your entire employee audience. It's important to balance that kind of what I call laser focus on the new strategy and where you intend to go with kind of a broad awareness of what's happening out there. It's important to understand what's happening out there. And then ultimately, I would say venture into forecasting with great humility. I think it's important now for leadership and for marketers and for brand strategists to recognize that these are unknown times. We cannot know the future. And so it's important for us to lead with questions as opposed to with answers, and make sure that we're open to whatever answers the universe has to present to us. Relative to the question of, is it different for larger companies? I would say no. I would say the exact same principles apply. And maybe the biggest difference is they'll have more systems set up already, including technology systems and employee departments to handle all of this kind of work. But it's absolutely no different. The principles remain the same.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking cash flows recently, and gentleman that I was speaking with talked about over exaggerating from a planning standpoint sales, and then also over exaggerating how fast you get cash in payment on your receivables. And so you're talking about from a positioning marketing standpoint, kind of the same, just overzealous on their forecasting in a situation with a lot of unknowns.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. Thanks, Rick.
So we had a question come in from Sherilyn. And can you recommend a couple of sites that you like to visit for marketing information and inspiration?
Oh, let's see. I think Kellogg University has some great content. Actually, I think the best thing to do is just search for branding and brand strategy, and then look for the brands that you really respect and think highly of. Because you can find brand strategy information anywhere from the New York Times and Wall Street Journal to university websites to famous brand strategy companies like Interbrand. I mean, Interbrand might be one of the biggest and best in the entire world and most renowned for excellence in brand strategy and excellence in brand creation. So I think probably Interbrand might be a go-to for me.
Okay. And then we talked a lot about a number of very helpful tips and hints and growth hacks and strategies for looking forward. What are some of the mistakes that you've been seeing from companies, whether they be print or media ads or whatever? What kinds of things have you seen that really made you think, boy, they missed the mark there?
Right. Well, I think some of the companies that we've seen that didn't close right away, some of the stores that did close right away, that's a message to the marketplace that you care about the customer and that you want them to stay well and you want them to be healthy and be alive. And yet there were some companies that sort of misstepped, and I won't name who they are, but who decided, wait, we need the revenues, we need the profits. And if this thing's going to be bad, we need as much as we can get right now. And they tried to stay open for longer periods of time. I think that gave the marketplace the wrong message that said that they were putting profit above people. And that can be a very dangerous message and be very damaging to a brand long term.
Hmm. All right. And then as you think about our talk here today or looking forward, we're getting the end of our time. And again, Ann, thank you very much for joining us. Hashtag brand strategy. If you have a last question or want to get in the drawing for Ann's time, click the like and subscribe buttons. But any other closing thoughts, perspectives, anything else you'd like to share as you reflect on what we've talked about here today, or kind of how you think the future looks?
Thank you, Rick. I would say remember that we're designed to persevere, to struggle, and even to thrive. And this is literally how we discover who we are. And perhaps we even find hints about why we exist, getting back to the earlier conversation. And ultimately, be smart, be kind, be aware, be bold, be curious. And keep in mind that whatever you're not changing in a time like this, you are choosing. In other words, you're choosing complacency. So I would look at changing up just about anything that's happening in your business or in your company. And lastly, I would say hold everyone you encounter with what I call unconditional positive regard, because you just never know where people are coming from or what they're struggling with. And so the more we engage with people without any judgment and just assume the best intention and give the best response and be your best self, I think that's the best advice we can possibly share today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, for folks that want to reach you, Ann, your email is?
It is Anne, Anne, at Vyway, and I'll spell that. It's V as in Victor, YWAY.com.
And again, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you here and look forward to having you back sometime in the future.
Great, Rick. It has been a pleasure for me too. I really appreciate all your support.
Thank you.